Hi, everyone. I'm really happy with the interest that the intermittent fasting and metabolic health series generated. For those of you that have asked for some more, I have for you my first mini bonus presentation as an addition to the intermittent fasting and metabolic health series. In this video, I will be discussing a buzzword that often comes along with intermittent fasting, being autophagy. Here's what you're going to learn: what autophagy is, whether it is beneficial, and how it relates to intermittent fasting, what research we have on intermittent fasting and autophagy, and whether we should practice intermittent fasting for the purposes of autophagy. Let's start with the basic definition of autophagy, which is the degradation of cellular components. In fact, the literal meaning is self-eating. Because autophagy helps to remove damaged and dysfunctional proteins, it is associated with many benefits, including longevity, reduced risk of cancer, slowing of neurodegeneration, and anti-aging. It is activated or enhanced by sleep, exercise, caloric restriction, and fasting. Therefore, the logic for practicing intermittent fasting to enhance the associated benefits goes like this. Intermittent fasting increases autophagy. Autophagy is essential for slowing aging. Therefore, intermittent fasting slows aging. Before diving into the research we have testing this relationship, let's make sure we fully understand why autophagy is associated with anti-aging. I'm going to go over one very important role autophagy plays in this process. Here is a mitochondria, as how it is often depicted in textbooks as a bean-shaped organelle. The mitochondria is often referred to as the powerhouse of the cell, and that is because one of its jobs is to take energy-containing nutrients, which go through a series of reactions to be able to enter the mitochondria, and they are converted to ATP. ATP is then the form of energy our bodies can use for organ functions, such as our muscles using it to contract. However, one other thing that the mitochondria produces is these unstable molecules known as reactive oxygen species. These little guys are missing an electron, so they look to steal electrons from other molecules. So what do? Well, they can take it from other compounds in our cells, such as protein structures that serve important functions. And when they take electrons from these proteins, that leaves them damaged and dysfunctional. Aging is associated with both an increase in these reactive oxygen species and thus strongly related to the amount of damaged and dysfunctional proteins in our cells. What autophagy can do, which is the role of the lysosome, is come in and clean up these damaged and dysfunctional proteins so that they don't contribute to poor health and aging. Therefore, it has a very important role to play, as we definitely do not want those damaged and dysfunctional proteins laying around. Here's another way of describing the role of autophagy and something else that is important to keep in mind. These cartoons are an excellent way to depict what I'm about to show you and are credited to Daniel Kleonsky from his 2018 publication in the journal Autophagy. Let's say this room represents a cell, and all the items in the room are different proteins. The mess is damaged, dysfunctional proteins that we don't want around. The worker is the lysosome, which can carry out the cleaning process of autophagy. This is what we would consider an optimal level of autophagy. The dysfunctional proteins are now cleaned up, and the functional proteins remain. This is what happens when we have too much autophagy. Not only are the dysfunctional proteins removed, but so are the proteins that were functional, that our body could have used. This means that the cell experienced too much autophagy and we went overboard. This shows that there is such a thing as both too little autophagy and too much. What we really want is that sweet spot of just enough autophagy, that is removing damaged and dysfunctional proteins, but leaving the functional ones. Now let's look at the research relating intermittent fasting to longevity. The question is really, does the enhancement in autophagy from fasting promote anti-aging and a longer lifespan? Now, autophagy is very difficult to measure in humans, and research to see if fasting extends lifespan is obviously very difficult to do. So we have to look at other models, such as rodents, which is where most of the research comes from. In this study, they had mice who had access to food for 24 hours, 13 hours, and 3 hours, starting at 4 months of age, just after the mice had completed full-size development. And they had them on these feeding regimens for the rest of their life. What did they find? Well, if you look at this graph, you see that the red line representing the group that only had a feeding window of 3 hours did live the longest. If you compare this to the 13-hour feeding window group, which is close to the typical feeding window of a human, they lived on average 13 weeks longer, or extended their lifespan by about 17%. If you apply this to the average lifespan of a human, that is a pretty significant difference. With the average lifespan of a Canadian being 82 years, 17% would be an additional 14 years of life if they were to practice daily intermittent fasting from their teen years. However, whenever we are looking at rodent research, there are a few things we need to consider when it comes to its application to human beings. First, the basal metabolic rate, resting metabolism of rodents, is 6.4 times faster and is more dynamic, meaning it fluctuates in different conditions, much more than a human's does. Their heart rate is 4.7 times faster. Protein turnover of their different tissues, like muscle and organs, is about 9.6 times faster. Because of these, they live about 27 times faster. Their life length is only 2 to 3 years. This means that one mouse day would be around 27 human days, and about 13.5 rodent days would be the equivalent of 1 human year. They're also naturally nocturnal. They're in a caged environment, which is completely different from humans. We often say that rodents have feedings, whereas humans have meals, because rodents are known to way overeat, as opposed to humans who will save food for later. And mice will voluntarily run 3 to 7 hours, or about 5 to 20 kilometers per day, naturally, without any incentive. In fact, when they do exercise studies in rodents, all they need to do is put the exercise group in a cage with a wheel and put the non-exercise group in a cage without a wheel. Therefore, as you can imagine, there are a few issues or things we need to take into consideration with the application of autophagy or intermittent fasting research to humans. In the research that has been done on rodents, they are often not given access to exercise, are not in a real world setting, and instead are restricted to a cage. The control animals often become overweight due to unrestricted intake, which was seen in the study I showed you where the intermittent fasting mice lived longer. So was it just the fasting that resulted in the longer lifespan, or was a lower body weight playing a role? They also start their fasting very early in life and did it every single day. And just to note, certain models of rodents, as in different kinds of mice and rats, actually exhibit a decrease in lifespan with intermittent fasting. Therefore, this is what I'd like to leave you with. First, autophagy is an important process. Do we need intermittent fasting for autophagy to maximize lifespan? This cannot be answered today. especially in humans, we need more research. There's likely an optimal level of autophagy, not too much, not too little. We're looking for the sweet spot like we saw in the cartoons. Whether someone needs more or less is very complex and likely dependent on a number of factors, including activity levels, sleep, and diet. And I'd like to leave you with something that I often say, which is don't lose the forest for the trees. And what I mean in this case is before even considering something like intermittent fasting for your longevity, first make sure you have things that we already know enhance longevity covered, including exercise, an overall nutritious diet, and adequate sleep. Thanks for watching.